His voice was stolen by a curse. His pack's magic is dying. Alpha Kai is drowning in silence, unable to warn his people of the war brewing in the shadows. His only hope? A human woman who doesn't even know his world exists. You won't want to miss how these two find a language that can save their world. Welcome back to Lily's Heart Tales, where every story is a deep dive into fate, magic, and the love that defies the odds. If you're new here, tap that subscribe button now and join our pack. For generations, the Greywood Pack has been protected by the Moon Wards, a magical barrier sustained by the very bloodline of their alpha. But 5 years ago, a rival coven cursed their leader, silencing his voice and crippling the wards. Inside the dark, ancient stone pack house, the shimmering magical shield flickered violently, sparking, and then dimmed to almost nothing. Kai was tense, his huge hands slamming a fist on the war table. He desperately scribbled on paper, the scratching sound intense. The Obsidian Claw moves tonight. The wards are at 10%. We need a way to communicate the ritual sequence to the elders. Lyra, his beta, knelt nearby. The alpha says, gather the healers and secure the west border. Her interpretation was calm, but the true urgency was lost. Lyra was his only voice, but her translations were always safe, missing the desperate fear he couldn't vocalize. He trusted her hands, but not her heart. Miles away, living in blissful ignorance, was Ava. She navigated the world of silence and sound, a human whose entire life was dedicated to giving a voice to the voiceless. She saw beyond words, reading the true meaning in a flicker of an eye or the tension in a shoulder. Driven by instinct and a fading plea from the moon itself, Kai ran. He was hunting a myth, the Luna bloodline that could break his curse. Instead, he ran straight into an ambush by the Obsidian Claw. Badly wounded, his wolf retreated, and the alpha collapsed in a strange, silent human world. Ava was locking up her clinic when she heard a faint, choked gasp. She saw Kai lying injured, a raw, ancient power radiating from him. He tried to point and gesture, a confusing flurry of big, desperate hand movements. Hold still, it's okay, she said, her voice soft and calm. I'm going to help you. Ava knelt. Kai looked into her eyes, then his gaze dropped, fixed not on her face, but on the precise, gentle movements of her hands as she checked his wound. The alpha, drowning in his primal need to communicate, felt his wolf stir, not with a roar, but with a silent, profound recognition. His fate and the survival of his pack rested on the hands of the one woman who spoke a language only the heart could teach. Chapter 1. Ava knew he wasn't human. There was an unsettling rightness to his massive build, a primal, untamed air that filled her small clinic back room. The scent of pine and rain clung to him, masking the sharp metallic tang of the blood that soaked his torn shirt. She had seen trauma before, but not this. His wound was deep, ragged, and inexplicably healing faster than any normal humans should. Yet his eyes, currently fixed on the ceiling with a chilling intensity, held genuine panic. She finished cleaning the deep gash on his shoulder, the skin already knitting itself back together in a supernatural rush. As she reached for the needle, he flinched, not in pain, but in resistance. His large hand shot up, a blur of muscle and bone, trying to push her away with a clear, authoritative gesture. "Hey," Ava said, her voice low and calm, using the tone she reserved for soothing distressed clients. "I need you to stay still. I'm helping." He didn't understand her soft, verbal command, but the firmness in her hand, the quiet confidence in her movement, registered with a jolt. He was an alpha king, a creature born to dominate and command, and to be held still by this small, soft human felt like an insult to his very being. His eyes narrowed, burning with a silent fury born of wounded pride and frustration, but he grudgingly subsided. He was too weak to fight her, and some deep, primal instinct told him she was safe. As she finished the hasty stitch, more for show than necessity at this point, she placed a pad and pen on the bedside table beside him, pointing. "Write it down. Tell me what happened." He looked at the pen as if it were a poisonous insect. With a violent, sudden swipe, he knocked the materials across the room, his frustration a physical wave that made Ava jump. He shook his head sharply. "Writing is not my voice. It's a cage. She must listen to my commands, not my scribbles." The silence stretched, heavy and dangerous. Ava realized her mistake. This man wasn't just mute. He was denying communication because his means of expression had been stolen. He was a commander, and he needed a language that held the same power as a roar. She took a slow, calming breath, thinking. She stood up, then slowly, deliberately brought her hands up. She formed the simple, clear sign for water, then food. She signed hurt, pointing to his shoulder. Kai watched her hands, his eyes tracking the precise, intentional movements. His confusion slowly gave way to a startled recognition. The words were silent, yet structured. They held meaning without sound. The language of the wolf is silent command. The language of the hands was silent connection. When Ava signed water again, he nodded once, sharply, acknowledging the need. She poured him a glass. When he had finished, he gestured crudely to his throat, then brought his hands up in a flurry of confusing, desperate movements, a torrent of nonverbal language that was nothing but pure panic. I can't follow that," Ava said, frowning. "It's too fast. You have to be clear." He slammed his fist against the table, the raw, primal sound making her jump. His inability to convey the complex, urgent truth about his failing pack and the Obsidian Claw threat was a physical agony. He grabbed her wrist, his grip immense and desperate, and forced her hand to his chest, over his heart. Then he signed mate with a crude, demanding, and unmistakable motion. It was the only complex word he knew, a word driven purely by the bond that had flared the moment she touched him. Ava's eyes widened, a blush heating her cheeks. Mate? The word was an anchor, a revelation, and a terror all at once. It explained the fire she felt, the overwhelming sense of responsibility, but it did nothing to address the imminent threat. She gently pulled her wrist free, her fingers already working, slowing down her movements to match the pace he could absorb. She signed, "My name is Ava. Your name?" He watched, then signed with a simple, powerful clarity, "Kai." His eyes held hers, and in that moment, the Alpha's desperation finally broke through his pride. He realized this human, this tiny source of light, was the only key to breaking the suffocating silence. He raised his enormous hands, trying to form the question that would determine the fate of his world, signing with brutal, non-standard signs. "Can you teach me to speak with hands?" His hands were screaming the question his heart could no longer bear to hold. And in that desperate plea, Ava knew this was no passing rescue. She was the Alpha's last hope. Ava didn't hesitate. She saw past the Alpha's demanding eyes to the sheer panic of a leader failing his people. The desperate plea in his hands was a greater volume than any scream. She signed the word clearly and spoke softly. "Yes, I can teach you to speak with your hands, but you must trust me completely, Alpha." Kai stared at her, the intensity of his gaze unwavering. He couldn't speak the word, but his posture communicated acceptance, though tinged with profound, wounded pride. He was an Alpha accepting a lifeline from a creature he was meant to protect. He gestured sharply toward a chair and a clean, cleared area of the floor, signaling an immediate and uncompromising start. The first lesson was less a teaching and more a battle of wills. Alpha Kai's wolf mind was brilliant, absorbing the vocabulary instantly. His memory was photographic and primal, but his hands were heavy tools of war and absolute command. They lacked the fluid, expressive grace the silent language required. Ava tried to slow him down, demonstrating the need for subtlety. "SLOW," she signed, her movement deliberate and clear. "The meaning is in the shape and the expression, not just the motion. Try mate. He signed mate with a jagged, possessive movement, his fingers snapping together with an inherent violence. It was harsh, demanding, and utterly primal, a territorial claim, not a connection. "No, Alpha," Ava gently corrected, stepping closer. She reached out, her fingers intentionally brushing his large, calloused palm to guide the motion. A spark, hotter and deeper than any physical fire, jolted through them both. It was a current of ancient power and instinct that knocked the air from her lungs. Ava gasped, pulling back slightly, her eyes wide. Kai's breath hitched, his irises darkening to an intoxicating, dangerous gold he couldn't control. This was it. The mate bond, a silent, undeniable force that had called him across the miles and brought him to his knees. Ava forced herself to concentrate, ignoring the dizzying heat radiating off him. "The word mate isn't a threat, Alpha. It's not a capture," she managed, her voice thick. She signed the word again, with a slow, tender curve, placing her hands over her heart first. "It's a connection, a promise, a part of the soul." He watched her hands, his breathing ragged and his massive chest rising and falling quickly. He copied the sign, his movement stiff at first, then miraculously melting into the soft, circular shape of her gesture. He signed it perfectly. Mate. The silent word hung in the air between them, a raw, exposed declaration that sealed their fate. Over the next few frantic hours, the lessons continued, now fueled by the powerful, escalating tension of the bond. She taught him the signs for the core truths of his existence: curse, power, obsidian, enemy. He relayed his story through a series of blunt, simple signs, his urgency translating even the most basic vocabulary into a terrifying narrative. 5 years, silence, Lyra, beta, helps, but, she, not true. Ava frowned, catching the underlying message that went beyond simple syntax. "Lyra is loyal, isn't she? Your trusted beta?" Kai leaned forward, his eyes burning with intense conviction. He signed the word secret, and then, with devastating clarity, pointed to Lyra's absence and signed Lyra, fears my silence, now. A chill ran down Ava's spine. Lyra wasn't necessarily a spy, but she was definitely compromised by the Alpha's silent, weakened state, a vulnerability she might exploit. Kai then signed the complex word for ritual and pointed to a hidden symbol etched faintly onto his skin. A symbol Ava instantly recognized from her own background as a researcher of forgotten spiritual languages. It was the mark of the Luna's blood. The curse can be broken by the ritual, but only if you can communicate the ancient chants to the elders, Ava realized, speaking aloud as he signed the final desperate plea. Teach. Faster. Moon. Comes. He signed full moon and held up 2 fingers, indicating 2 days. 2 days. 2 days until his pack fell silent forever, or until she, a human sign language interpreter, could give the Alpha King his voice back. Ava met his gaze, signing her response with the same fierce resolve she saw in him. We start now. No rest. You will speak again, Alpha. Chapter 2. The desperate lessons consumed the next day, blurring the line between teacher and mate. Ava moved through the silent space, signing the complex grammar of the ancient pack chants, while Kai sat opposite her, his massive presence strained with concentration. He was learning at a terrifying pace, the shifter's heightened intellect locking onto the language of her hands. He devoured the signs for history, lineage, and the specific ritual components. But Kai's signs were still inherently harsh and authoritative. He signed protection like a demand and pack like a wall slammed shut. The meaning was clear, but the feeling was wrong. Alpha, Ava signed gently, stopping his frantic motion. The ritual is a plea to the moon. Your hands must plead, not command. Try protection again. He struggled, his brow furrowed in frustration. He was a warrior. Softness was a foreign concept. He signed it again, strong, almost angry. Ava reached out, her fingers closing around his. "No," she whispered, guiding his movement. "The moon requires humility. Sign it softly, like a prayer for someone you cherish, not a threat against an enemy." Kai followed her lead, his fierce gold eyes locked on hers. He signed the word again, and this time, a flicker of true vulnerability crossed his face. Protection. "Yes," Ava breathed. "The meaning is clear, Alpha, but your hands are screaming. Try to sign it softly, like a plea, not an order." He worked on the sign for several minutes, his immense effort humbling to watch. He was learning empathy through communication, forced to channel feeling before form. As the sun dipped, staining the room orange, Kai finally felt confident enough to explain the most sensitive truth. He signed the sequence. Curse, not, just, silence. He then reached for her left wrist, tracing a faint, crescent-shaped birthmark she had always dismissed as insignificant. Kai signed, "This key, Luna blood." Ava stared at the mark, then back at him. "Luna blood? What does that mean?" He signed slowly, intensely, forcing every detail to register. Curse, stole, voice, but, wards, fail, because, Luna, bloodline, is required to sustain wards. He signed again, pointing first to his silence, then to her wrist. "We were separated for too long. You are the Luna." Ava reeled back, the truth hitting her like a physical blow. She wasn't just his mate, she was the missing magical link. The reason the pack was dying was because her ancestors had been pulled from the pack decades ago, severing the lifeblood of their magic. Before she could process the revelation, a floorboard creaked in the outer room. Kai's head snapped up. His wolf instinct, honed by years of silent observation, was instantly alert. He grabbed Ava, signing the warning sign for danger with brutal force. The door to the room cracked open just enough for a sliver of light to enter. Lyra, the beta, stood on the other side. She hadn't seen their hands, but she had heard the intense whisper of Ava's voice explaining the word Luna blood. The shadow of jealousy and fear passed over Lyra's face as she quickly closed the door, pretending she had simply been checking on their guest. Kai signed rapidly, desperately. Lyra heard. She knows truth. She wants power. Ava felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. The internal betrayal was now confirmed. She wasn't just fighting a time limit and a curse. She was fighting a rival for the throne who knew she was the key. She looked at Kai, signing her resolve. Lyra, enemy, but we must finish ritual first. Lyra moved away from the door, her heart pounding a furious, jealous rhythm against her ribs. She hadn't heard the full, complex signing, but she had heard the words that mattered. Luna blood. The curse wasn't just silence, it was a severed lineage. Kai hadn't chosen this human simply as his mate. He had brought her back to save the pack magic that she, Lyra, had been forced to protect in his silence. For 5 years, Lyra had ruled in everything but name, interpreting the Alpha's commands and maintaining order. The pack's strength had rested in her hands. The human would take that away, forcing Lyra back into the shadows of a beta. Lyra slipped into the dark, silent forest. She knew exactly where to go, the rival territory, the Obsidian Claw Alpha, a wolf named Fenris. Fenris was ruthless, hungry, and had been demanding the Greywood territory for months. Reaching the edge of the Obsidian territory, Lyra signed her presence in the dirt, a crude, desperate request for a meeting. Fenris emerged from the shadows, his wolf form larger and darker than Kai's, his eyes burning with malice. Lyra spoke, her voice laced with venom. "Your plan to take the territory is flawed. The curse will be broken in 2 days." Fenris was skeptical, signing slowly, dangerously. "The Alpha is still silenced. The wards are dying. Why do you come to me?" "He found the key," Lyra signed back, feeling the coldness of her betrayal settle deep in her bones. A human. Ava. She is the Luna bloodline. If she performs the ritual, the wards return at full power. We need to stop her now. Tonight. Fenris gave a terrifying, silent nod of acceptance. He knew the immense, ancient power of the Luna bloodline. He signed his part of the pact. You stop the ritual. I take the pack. You become my beta, shared power. Lyra agreed, sealing the pact with a dark sign of intent. Back at the clinic, the danger materialized quickly. Kai and Ava were deep in the lessons when a thick, oily darkness began to seep under the door. It wasn't physical, it was magical shadow rope, Fenris's signature attack, seeking to bind and silence the new Luna. Kai roared a silent internal command and surged forward. But the shadow rope struck first, wrapping around his strong, powerful hands, binding them uselessly behind his back. The attack was swift and intelligent. It targeted his only means of communication. He signed frantically with his shoulders and face, a primitive, panicked message that Ava understood instantly. Lyra, betrayed, use, escape. Ava, realizing they were cornered, grabbed the first items of necessity. Kai's makeshift pack of healing herbs, a vial of potent magical ward dust she had found among his things, and her own small backpack containing her notebook and markers. She looked at Kai, unable to use her hands to sign while clutching the items. She spoke to him instead. I need your wolf, Kai. Run. He nodded, forcing his muscles to move despite the paralyzing magic. He crashed through the back window, the glass shattering. Ava followed, throwing the ward dust behind her to briefly neutralize the shadow rope. They landed hard in the cold night air. Kai, still bound, fell into a frantic, immediate shift. The magnificent greywood wolf, massive and desperate, clawed its way out of his human skin. The shadow rope tore, snapping off the wolf's powerful foreleg in a flash of dark magic. But he was free. He nudged Ava urgently with his nose, demanding she mount his back. As they fled into the black forest, running toward the sanctuary of the distant packlands, the chilling howl of the Obsidian Alpha, Fenris, echoed behind them, a promise of war and pursuit. The high-stakes chase had begun, forcing the silent Alpha and his human mate out of the safety of their hidden classroom and onto the battlefield. Chapter 3. The journey to the pack house was a desperate 2-hour blur. Kai, running with a fierce, wounded gait, carried Ava deeper into the ancient forest. The Obsidian Alpha's howl was a persistent, terrifying pulse miles behind them. They arrived at the Greywood Pack's meeting grounds just as the Elder Council, a ring of grim-faced, ancient wolves, was assembling. Lyra, having slipped back ahead of them, stood before the council with a look of practiced distress and righteous fury. Kai shifted back from his wolf, naked, imposing, and bound by only the lingering paralysis of the shadow rope on his right hand. He was still the Alpha, but the weakness was visible, and Lyra was exploiting it. He returns, elders, Lyra declared, her voice ringing with false loyalty. But look how he returns. Compromised, running from his duty, and consorting with a human spy. A woman who carries the forbidden mark of a rogue ancestor. Kai surged forward, a silent, furious roar trapped in his chest. He tried to sign a defense, but the residual magic from the shadow rope made his right hand useless, and his left hand could only gesture wildly. An old, stern elder signed to Kai, Alpha, defend, your choice, and your silence. Kai couldn't write. He couldn't speak. He could only sign with his one good hand, but it wasn't enough to convey the complex truth of Lyra's betrayal and the Luna bloodline. He looked at Ava, signing his silent command. You speak my truth now. Ava stepped forward, her calm presence a stark contrast to Kai's desperate fury. She faced the hostile circle of elders and Lyra's venomous glare. The Alpha can defend himself, elders, Ava stated, her voice steady. But only through the language he was denied. He has chosen me to be his voice, because I am the only one who can understand the truth of his silence. The trial began. The elders signed their accusations, demanding answers about the failing wards and the attack. Ava watched Kai's single dominant hand, translating his intricate, furious signing in real time. Kai signed Lyra, compromised, pact with Obsidian. Ava projected his fury. The Beta has made a pact with the Obsidian Claw to undermine the Alpha's rule while he is silenced, Lyra scoffed. A desperate lie. She is a liar and a spy. She has used her human magic to enthrall him. The elders signed their final challenge: prove loyalty or face exile. The curse is our only truth. Speak what only the Alpha knows. The tension was suffocating. Kai, realizing words were failing, began to sign the deepest, most sensitive truth about the curse, the one that revealed the Luna bloodline and Ava's role. He signed the sequence with his one good hand, and his eyes drilled into Ava's, challenging her to translate the devastating secret and risk her own life. Ava took a deep breath, her eyes flicking back to the crescent mark on her wrist. She projected his truth, her voice unwavering. The curse is not simply magic. It is a break in the sacred Luna bloodline. The wards failed because the pack has been separated from the true Luna for too long, and I, Ava, carry that blood. I am the key. A collective gasp swept through the council. Ava had just sealed her fate, proving both her knowledge and her extreme danger to the pack's power structure. Kai, exhausted but validated, signed one last powerful word: ritual. The revelation of Ava's Luna blood sent a furious, whispering shockwave through the assembled elders. Lyra seized the opportunity, her voice dripping with poison. She speaks the truth of the lineage only because she learned it from the Alpha, Lyra hissed. It is the perfect lie. The mark on her wrist is meaningless. She has no power. She is an empty vessel brought here to distract us while the Obsidian Alpha prepares his final strike. The oldest elder, his face a mask of deep skepticism, signed the verdict. Proof is required. You are not a shifter. You are not bound by loyalty. If you cannot show us your heart's true intent, exile for both. The threat was absolute. Exile meant they would be cast out into the forest just as Fenris and the Obsidian Claw arrived. Ava looked at Kai, who was trembling with silent, contained rage. His one working hand flew up, signing, "Don't leave me. They are wrong." Ava knew the logical truth of the Luna blood was not enough. They needed the emotional truth of the mate bond, a connection that transcended logic, lineage, and language. Ignoring the elders, ignoring Lyra's triumphant sneer, Ava took a single deliberate step toward Kai. She didn't use her voice, and she didn't use sign language. She focused her entire being, her empathy, her love, and the sudden rush of power she felt from the Luna blood, into a single radical gesture. She stepped into his space, placed her palms flat against the sides of his temples, and closed her eyes. The contact was a blinding, electric shock. Ava used the newfound strength of their burgeoning mate bond to push past the wreckage of the curse, past his alpha walls, and into the core of his mind. She didn't seek his memories, she projected hers, the genuine, desperate wish to heal him, the pain she felt for his stolen voice, and the absolute, selfless commitment to the Greywood pack she now felt in her soul. Trust me, see me, I am your voice and your heart. Inside Kai's mind, the internal chaos that had been his only companion for 5 years was suddenly flooded with a serene, undeniable clarity. He saw her soul, pure, resolute, and bound to him. The betrayal, the fear, the doubt, it all dissolved under the weight of her truth. A deep, powerful sensation surged up from his core, tearing through the magical knot of the curse. It wasn't the guttural, frustrated gesture of the earlier days. It was a single, primal, magnificent sound that shook the very ground beneath the council. A howl. It was an unwitting, raw sound of total surrender and profound acceptance. The first sound Kai had made in 5 years, the voice of the wolf, proclaiming his love and acceptance of his Luna. The sound ripped through the air, sending the elders staggering back in shock. Lyra paled, her face a mask of utter defeat. The howl was the unimpeachable proof of the Alpha's heart and the mate's loyalty. The magic of the wards, which had been dim and flickering, pulsed once, strong and golden, in direct response to the Alpha's sound. The Council's decision was instantly nullified. Kai pulled Ava into his chest, his immense hands finally free of the shadow rope's paralysis, his silent message now thunderous, mine. Chapter 4. The echoes of Kai's involuntary howl, the sound of his broken curse and his claimed mate, had barely faded before the ground began to tremble. Lyra, exposed and disgraced, didn't wait for the elder's punishment. Her eyes, filled with cold, furious power, locked onto Ava before she turned and vanished into the trees. The Elder Council was still reeling from the shock of the howl, their politics dissolving in the face of raw, undeniable mate magic. Kai, his breathing ragged, grabbed Ava's hand and signed the warning that finally needed no interpretation. Too late. Lyra, sold, U.S., Fenris, comes now. Before the council could organize a defense, a massive, predatory shadow dropped from the branches above. It was Fenris, the Obsidian Alpha, and Lyra was beside him, no longer a beta, but a desperate, furious warrior wearing the enemy's color. The Luna blood belongs to the victor, not the silenced fool, Lyra snarled, her voice a cruel echo of her betrayal. She pointed a razor-sharp claw at Ava. Kill the key, Fenris, then claim the territory. The battle was instant and brutal. Fenris shifted, becoming a terrifying black wolf, larger, heavier, and fueled by years of hatred. Kai pushed Ava behind the safety of the nearest elder, transforming instantly into his own powerful greywood wolf. The two alphas clashed with a roar of teeth and ancient resentment. Kai was fierce, but he was still recovering from the curse's lingering effects and the shadow rope attack. Fenris's power was cold and overwhelming. Ava knew the fight was a distraction. Their goal wasn't to win this battle, it was to finish the ritual. While the wolves tore into each other, Ava ducked low. She reached Kai, who was pinned beneath the Obsidian Alpha's weight. She knew he couldn't vocalize his commands. She had to take the lead. Ava signed quickly, urgently, using the complex pack chant signs he had absorbed. I go to altar, you must hold them. Kai, locked in the throat hold of his enemy, couldn't reply with his hands. Instead, his wolf nudged her hard with his muzzle, a clear, unmistakable command to run. He then flicked his ear in the direction of the setting moon, the nonverbal signal for the sacred altar hidden deep within the mountain pass. Ava understood instantly. The lessons had done more than teach them a language. They had merged their instincts. He was telling her to go, to trust his ability to buy time. Clutching the ritual knife and the vial of sacred dust, Ava took off, sprinting away from the brutal, grinding battle. She ran toward the dark mountain where the ancient altar waited. Behind her, Kai, still pinned, let out a massive, challenging howl. Not the emotional plea of the trial, but a deep, rolling sound of alpha command meant to divert every enemy eye from the fleeing Luna. The chase had begun again, but this time the entire fate of the pack rested not on the silent alpha, but on the speed and resolve of his human mate. Ava ran as if the very moon was chasing her. The high mountain path was slick with cold dew, and the air was thin and sharp. Behind her, the sounds of the alpha war, snarling, cracking bone, and the furious howls of Kai and Fenris faded, replaced by the relentless, focused breathing of a single tracker. Lyra. Ava scrambled up a final, steep incline. There it was, the altar of the moon wards. It was a massive, ancient flat stone encircled by mossy runes, glowing faintly with residual magic. She threw down her bag and pulled out the ritual knife and the vial of sacred dust. Before she could even position the knife, a dark figure launched from the shadows. Lyra. "You won't ruin 5 years of work for a foreign mate bond, human!" Lyra snarled, her voice raw with desperation. "I maintain this pack. I deserve the power." Lyra attacked, not as a wolf, but as a shifter warrior, relying on speed and sharp claws. Ava ducked, narrowly avoiding a strike that would have gutted her. She wasn't a fighter, but she was fast, and she was focused. "You threw away your pack for fear!" Ava yelled, retreating behind the altar stone. "The wards failed because you lacked the courage to find the Luna." "The Luna is a myth. Power is all that matters," Lyra screamed, lunging across the stone. The two collided violently near the center of the altar. Lyra wrestled the knife from Ava's grasp, pinning her down. With a cruel sneer, she raised the blade, intent on severing the Luna bloodline forever. Just as the knife began to descend, Ava used her strength not to fight, but to communicate. With her free hand, she signed a single, desperate, complex message straight at Lyra's face. "Curse isn't Kai, it is the ritual." Lyra froze, confusion flickering in her eyes. The complex, urgent sequence was a perfect, distracting pattern interrupt. Ava kicked out, knocking Lyra off balance. The knife clattered onto the stone. As Lyra scrambled back, Ava grabbed the knife. Lyra, realizing she was losing, grabbed Ava's injured wrist and twisted, trying to force a mistake. "You're a fool! You don't even know the words!" Lyra spat, watching the struggle between the two hands, the powerful alpha hand returning to the pack, and the weak, frantic Luna hand. Ava was in agony, but she couldn't let go of the knife. She looked down at the ritual instructions, the signs Kai had taught her, and realized the terrifying central truth he hadn't had the time to fully articulate. Kai had signed that the ritual broke the silence, but the final sign, the one for the true cure, was still missing. In a flash of instinct, Ava signed the realization to Lyra, her hand movements precise and desperate. "The cure is not to free Kai, it is to transfer the curse." Lyra gasped. The ancient pack magic was always about balance. The ritual was not for healing the afflicted, but for removing the affliction by placing it onto the sacred stone, or onto the next person who claimed the power. Lyra's eyes widened in horror. She hadn't realized the cost of the power she sought to steal. Just then, a roar echoed from the forest below. Kai, wounded but furious, was closing in. Ava, with a sudden surge of Luna blood power, threw Lyra backward. She grabbed the ritual knife, looking at the inscription on the altar stone. The ritual was meant to draw the curse from the Alpha, but she knew now what Kai had been unable to articulate. The ritual must be performed on the one cursed to save the pack, but it would only be successful if the recipient willingly accepted the transfer. She looked down at the knife and the altar, knowing she only had seconds. She had the Luna blood. She had the ritual tools. She was the mate. But to break the Alpha's silence, she would have to risk her own. Chapter 5. The ritual was chaos made manifest. Lyra, terrified by the revelation of the curse transfer, had scrambled back and vanished just as Kai, wounded and furious, burst onto the altar grounds. He was massive, his greywood wolf form bloody, but radiating an unstoppable alpha energy as he pursued Fenris, who had followed him up the mountain. The two alpha wolves collided again, crashing against the very edges of the altar stone, their battle an earthquake threatening to shatter Ava's focus. Ava knew she only had moments before the moon reached its peak. She ignored the snarling war behind her and forced herself to concentrate on the altar. She pulled out the ritual knife, her hands trembling not from fear, but from the immense power of the Luna blood surging through her. She began the delicate work, scattering the sacred dust into the ancient runes and drawing the necessary sigils onto the altar stone with the tip of the knife. This required absolute precision, But every few seconds, the earth shook as Kai and Fenris tore into each other nearby. "Focus, Ava. The moon requires clarity." She looked up. Kai was momentarily pinned by Fenris. He couldn't speak, but he looked at her and signed with his massive head, "Faster. They are coming." Ava, realizing Kai needed a powerful, immediate distraction, did not stop the ritual. Instead, she signed a complex, distracting message to Kai, forcing him to shift his focus from defense to an offensive tactic. "Use your hands for strength, not speech." Kai understood. His human mind grasped the tactical brilliance of the command. He stopped trying to bite, and using the pure human strength and technique Ava had taught him through simple gestures, twisted his body, getting a perfect shoulder hold on Fenris. He began crushing the Obsidian Alpha beneath his weight, a battle strategy Ava had signed to him days ago using simple body language. The distraction worked. Fenris was trapped, howling in agony, and Kai had bought her the precious minute she needed. But the silence had broken Lyra. She re-emerged from the shadows, her eyes wide and feral, clutching a splintered tree branch. She wasn't fighting for power anymore. She was fighting for revenge against the human who had exposed her. Lyra rushed the altar, aiming the branch not at Ava, but at the delicate runes she was completing. "If I can't be Luna, there will be no Luna." Ava met the attack. With one hand, she finished drawing the final critical sigil. With the other, she shoved the vial of sacred dust directly into Lyra's face. The dust exploded with a flash of cleansing magic. Lyra screamed, blinded and momentarily immobilized, stumbling back off the altar. The moon reached its zenith. Ava stood alone at the center of the glowing stone, bloodied and breathing heavily, the ritual elements complete. The altar pulsed, a brilliant column of silvery moonlight locking onto her. The curse was drawn out, waiting for a vessel. She looked at Kai, who had just managed to throw the immobilized Fenris down the mountain. He was severely wounded, covered in deep slashes, but he was winning. Now was the terrifying moment of the final choice. The curse was ready to be transferred. Ava raised the ritual knife above her heart, preparing to accept the Alpha's silent torment into herself, ready to sacrifice her voice for his. Ava stood at the center of the altar, bathed in the brilliant silver column of the full moon. The magic of the ritual was humming, drawing the ancient curse from Kai and concentrating it above her head, ready to transfer. She raised the ritual knife, preparing to make the final incision and accept the silence into herself. This was the cost of saving the pack. But just as the tip of the knife hovered over her skin, a massive, bloody hand shot out and clamped down hard around her wrist. Kai had shifted back to his human form, driven by a desperate final surge of alpha will. He was severely wounded, leaning heavily on the stone, but his eyes, clear and gold, were locked on hers. He used his hand, the one she had taught to communicate, and quickly signed, "No, mate, your voice is my life." He knew she was willing to sacrifice herself. He signed a complex, frantic sequence, a sign of the ritual he had learned, combined with the core truth of the Luna bloodline. Curse cannot be transferred. It must be purged by love. Ava stared at him, suddenly understanding the true purpose of the ritual. The magic wasn't about transfer. It was about acceptance. The curse could only be purged by the one who understood the pain of silence, fueled by the power of the unbroken mate bond. With his last ounce of strength, Kai brought his free hand up and placed it over his heart, connecting their two energies. He signed the sequence one final time. "Take it all with love." Ava, tears streaming down her face, didn't use the knife. She threw it aside and brought her own hands up, covering his. She channeled all the Luna blood power, all the love, all the silent communication they had built, directly into the massive, concentrated knot of the curse hovering above them. The column of moonlight exploded in a blinding golden light that washed over both of them. The ancient curse, starved of its host and purified by the powerful selfless mate energy, shattered. The magical knot vaporized into sparkling dust. A deep, powerful sensation tore through Kai's throat, unlocking the cage that had held him captive for 5 years. He gasped, falling to his knees, his eyes wide with shock and relief. He looked at Ava, who was collapsing from exhaustion, but unharmed. He reached out to her face, his hands now trembling with the ability to do more than sign. He spoke. His voice was rough, deep, and overwhelming, the true, magnificent voice of the Alpha King. "Ah, Va," he croaked, his first word in years, not an order, not a roar, but her name. "My Luna." The ancient pack wards, which had been flickering near the edge of oblivion, suddenly surged with blinding golden light. The magic was fully restored. The land itself celebrated. Fenris, who had been climbing back up the mountain, felt the blast of restored Luna magic. It was a cleansing fire that burned the Obsidian Alpha's dark magic, forcing him into a full, painful retreat. Kai pulled Ava close, burying his face in her hair, his deep, resonant voice rumbling against her ear. He had his voice back, and his pack was safe. The silence was broken by the power of their unspoken love. The epilogue. A language of forever. 6 months later. The Greywood pack house was no longer a shadow-draped ruin. The renewed moon wards shimmered with golden, unyielding power, a visible testament to the Alpha's restored voice and the new Luna's love. Inside the Grand Council Hall, the meeting was underway. The elders, now fully respectful, sat listening intently. Luna Ava stood by Kai's side, a figure of graceful authority. She was dressed in the ceremonial pack leathers, and the crescent Luna mark on her wrist was no longer a hidden secret, but a proud symbol of her lineage. Alpha Kai was speaking, his voice deep and resonant, a commanding, magnificent sound that filled the hall with the authority of a king. He spoke of new guard rotations, border treaties with neighboring allies, and the necessary exile of the traitor Lyra. Yet, despite his powerful voice, Kai paused frequently. As he delivered the most complex or emotionally resonant points, he would sign the key words, honor, unity, trust. Ava interpreted his signing and his spoken words simultaneously, giving the elders his full dual message. When he finished his formal address, Kai smiled, a warm, unguarded expression that made the council members relax. Ava leaned into the microphone. "The Alpha's formal statement is complete," she said, her voice clear and gentle. She then paused, turning to Kai with an intimate smirk. "And he told me just this morning, in a very loud voice, to tell the council no to the new guard schedule for the East Pass. He thinks you should all get more sleep." The council chuckled, the tension dissolving into warmth. The pack now understood that their Alpha was strongest when he spoke both the language of command and the language of his heart. Later that evening, back in their private chamber overlooking the shimmering wards, Ava was reading by firelight. Kai walked in, shedding his heavy coat. He spoke, his voice low and rumbling, a sound Ava still loved to hear, sometimes demanding that he simply talk to her just to feel the vibration. "I have my voice back," Kai said, walking toward her, his eyes filled with a peace he hadn't known in years. He knelt by her side. "But I still prefer your hands." He took her hands in his own, which were now strong and free, and gently kissed her palms. "They didn't just teach me to communicate. They taught me how to feel, how to plead, and how to trust. They taught me how to be worthy of my Luna." Ava smiled, a genuine, joyful light in her eyes. She signed her response, her hands moving with the familiar, beloved grace he had first seen in the clinic. "And they taught me how to listen to your heart, Alpha. My silence is your strength, and your voice is my home." He leaned in, his lips finding hers, sealing their bond once more, a forever woven from two worlds, united by a silent language of fate.